Healing is not a destination. It is a relentless pilgrimage back to yourself, one step at a time. Pain is not the enemy to eradicate. It is the fire you are called to sit with, to learn from, to illuminate your own broken promise and rewrite it with courage. To heal does not mean to become painless. It means to become present in the midst of pain. And that changes everything. At first, you recoil. You reach for the antidote: distractions, excuses, avoidance. You tell yourself that moving fast, reaching far, or numbing quiets the ache. But the ache returns, always, because pain is not erased. It is encoded in your psyche. It is a signal, not a problem. Until you listen, it will reroute your life through the same broken maps. So you slow, you pause. You choose to face it. The mornings you don't text, the nights you don't scroll, the silence you sit in, the tears you let fall. This is the discipline of presence. Not to punish yourself, but to practice showing up. Mindset shifts first. Pain is not a void to fill. It is a thread to follow. It vows. There is something here that deserves to be honored. You begin to say, I will not flee from what feels big. You anchor in what feels real. Belief reconstructs. You begin to trust that what breaks you can also heal you. That your soul carries regenerative codes, not just survival tactics. Pain becomes the teacher, not just the wound. You start to see in yourself what Nietzsche observed. That which does not kill you can make you if you let it. Clarity emerges. In the crucible of pain, you name what really matters: authenticity, not approval; connection, not performance; growth, not comfort. You stop building around your wounds and start through them. Vision is reframed. Your broken parts become the lanterns that light the path. Your scars are not blemishes, but maps. You begin to glimpse a future shaped not in spite of the ache, but through it. You no longer dream of things you can outrun. You dream of things you can become. Purpose ignites in small moments. The courage to speak your truth in the face of shame. The choice to extend kindness when you felt bitterness. The surrender of the control you once wielded to keep from feeling. Each choice is an altar on which you daily lay your pain and choose presence instead. Discipline is revealed as devotion, not denial. You don't meditate to escape the ache, you meditate within it. You don't avoid the numb, you breathe through it. You don't distract your grief. You sit with its voice until it softens. Discipline isn't an enemy of feeling. It is the container in which feeling becomes fertile. Action becomes not avoidance, but alignment. You write words that tremble. You set boundaries that shake others. You walk away from what still bruises because you're walking toward what restores. Action becomes your daily witnessing of what matters. Gratitude becomes prayer for the pain you once hated, because through it you learn compassion for your broken self, and compassion becomes the soil where resilience grows. Adaptability arrives when you stop chasing safety and start embracing uncertainty. When pain shows up disguised as anxiety, you stop running. You learn to breathe. You learn that resilience doesn't mean you won't break. It means you can hold the break and still be whole. Resilience becomes your signature. You don't vanish after failure. You don't crumble under sorrow. You bend, you fold, you integrate, and you rise again each time with more depth, with more people moved by your grace under fire. Learning becomes your daily offering. You don't just study self-help. You self-help. You witness your own evolution as the most sacred archive in the universe. You learn that healing is not about becoming unscarred. It's about becoming unbreakable in your presence. And so every morning you stand at the edge of your pain, not to conquer it, but to consecrate it. You say, I will not run away from my ache. I will let it refine me. You do this not once, but again and again. You pray in your breath. You pray in your silence. You pray in your scars. Healing is not wearing a label that says healed. It's carrying your humanity like sacred scripture. Opened, not folded. Cradled, not erased. When the world tells you to fix quickly, answer with patience. When illusion beckons you to bypass the hurt, answer with presence. When they ask, "Are you okay?" say, "I am learning. I am here." Because healing doesn't kill your pain, it baptizes through it. And in that baptism, you become the living testament that what is broken can be holy, that what is painful can be purposeful, that what is scarred can be song. Let your healing be your revolution, your altar, your anthem. Keep facing, keep rising, keep becoming the fierce, beautiful testament your ache always invited you to be. You are not broken. You are becoming, you are holy. And when the ache returns, as it will, not out of cruelty, but out of memory, you do not flinch. You do not shame it away. You simply nod in recognition, as if to say, "I remember you, but I'm not who I was when you first arrived." You walk into the ache now like it's a temple, because it is, a sacred space where your former self still kneels, and your current self offers a hand. You no longer ask, "When will this pain leave me?" You ask, "What deeper truth have you returned to reveal?" Because you've learned the paradox. Healing is not the absence of suffering. It is the presence of truth, lived, breathed, honored, even when it hurts. You don't decorate your life to hide the fractures. You illuminate them with art, with breath, with sacred rage, with sacred forgiveness. You don't pretend to be above the wound. You become the guardian of it, not as a victim, but as a witness to what it took to survive what tried to silence you. You don't wait for the world to understand your pain. You learn to speak to it in your own language. And in doing so, you free others to speak too. This is the silent revolution of healing. Not that you become immune to suffering, but that suffering loses its power to steal your identity. You are no longer the event. You are the echo. You are not the scar. You are the skin that chose to close. You are not what happened. You are what rose. And rising is no longer something dramatic. It is the quiet, relentless, holy choice to keep showing up to your story, to your breath, to your becoming every single day, because now your healing is not a project. It is a practice. You don't reach for it like a destination on the map. You wear it like weather on your skin. Some days it's storm. Some days it's Sunday. But either way, you show up barefaced, no armor, no disguise. Just you present and pulsing with the truth. That wholeness was never about being untouched, but about being unhidden. You've outgrown the need to be flawless. Now, you crave what's felt, what's lived, what leaves residue on the soul. You walk differently now, not faster, not with more force, but with intention, because you're not rushing away from the past. You've reconciled with it, not excused it, not minimized it, but met it eye to eye. And when it tried to define you, you responded with the calm defiance of someone who knows their roots go deeper than their pain. You stopped needing your past to approve your healing. You stopped needing your trauma to validate your growth. You learned to let go, not to erase, but to reclaim. And in the reclaiming, you found the thread that never broke, the thread of your essence, of your God image, of your wild hope. It was always there beneath the rubble of broken trust, of unmet needs, of silent screams no one heard but you. Now you hear them, you hold them, you carry them into light, not as baggage, but as sacred scrolls that say, "This is where I've been, this is who I became." You carry those scrolls not to impress, but to remember, because forgetting would be betrayal, not of the pain, but of the power it forged in you. You don't romanticize the suffering, but you honor its furnace. You name its weight, and you name your worth within it. You no longer look for meaning as a way to make the pain bearable. You create meaning because you've learned that meaning is not found, it is forged. Forged in the stillness of your deepest grief, forged in the silence after the apology that never came, forged in the dawn after the night you thought you wouldn't survive. You became your own sanctuary. You stitched a home from the fragments and found that nothing is more resilient than a soul that chose to stay. Stay awake, stay soft, stay open, even when the world tried to harden you. This is what makes your healing powerful. Not that it erased the pain, but that it taught you how to live without fearing it. You don't hide from the ache anymore. You walk beside it like an old friend with new respect, not because it controls you, but because you've made peace with its presence. And in that peace, you found something most never do. A life that doesn't just look healed, a life that feels like home. Because a life that feels like home is not built in triumph, it's built in truth. And truth, when you live inside it, asks everything of you. Not your perfection, but your permission to feel deeply without retreat, to speak clearly without apology, to stand wholly without needing validation from those still too afraid to see themselves. You no longer seek peace as a prize. You become peace as a presence, a stillness that doesn't shrink in the face of uncertainty, but steadies. You breathe now, not just to survive, but to sanctify. Each breath a prayer, each step a proclamation. You don't flinch when the past flickers. You don't scramble to explain your softness. You own it as the strength it's always been, because softness without shame is power without violence. It is the sword turned inward, not to wound, but to witness. And witnessing is where the healing stays alive, not locked in memory, but carried in motion, in how you love, in how you listen, in how you say no without guilt, and yes without fear. You're not trying to fix yourself anymore. You're trying to be with yourself, all of you, even the parts you once called weakness, that now whisper like scripture. I never needed to be erased. I only needed to be met. And you've met them, those neglected selves, those quiet, exiled parts that once only surfaced in the silence after the world stopped clapping. You no longer shove them down. You seat them beside you. You learn their names. You offer them language, and they don't fight anymore because they've finally been heard. That is the holy work now. Not transformation through force, but integration through reverence. You see how every shadow was only light in disguise, how every trigger was the ghost of a need left unmet, how every breakdown was not a threat, but an invitation. You stopped running from the storm when you realized you were the sky, not the weather. And so you hold it all now. The grief, the beauty, the desire, the discipline, the rage, the wonder. You hold it not like a burden, but like a torch. On you didn't find, one you forged. And that torch lights the way, not just for you, but for everyone who was waiting to see someone like them make it out without erasing who they were. That is the quiet legacy of healing. You don't just survive your pain, you redeem it. You name it sacred. You walk it forward, and it becomes the most powerful thing in the world, not what happened to you, but what you chose to do with it. Because now your life is no longer written in reaction. It's authored in revelation. You stop living as the aftermath of pain. You began living as the answer to it. Not to prove something, not to win, but to become, to show by example, not explanation, that depth does not drown you. It grounds you, and in that grounding, you find grace. Not the grace that asks you to smile through suffering, but the kind that meets you on the bathroom floor, eyelids swollen from another night of breaking, and whispers, "You don't need to have it all together to be worthy of breath. This is the gospel your scars preach now. That being human is not a flaw. It's the design. That feeling deeply is not a dysfunction. It's a direction, a compass leading you closer, not to control, but to communion with yourself, with others, with the divine, not the God you were taught to fear, but the one you now feel. In every quiet moment, you choose yourself instead of abandoning your soul for someone else's comfort. You've made peace with the fire, and now it lights your way. You no longer resist the dark. You navigate it because you know what lives there, and you are not afraid. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be present, to be real, to be here. And you are fully, finally, home. And being home in yourself doesn't mean the world stops spinning. It means you no longer lose your center when it does. You no longer measure your progress by the absence of pain. You measure it by your capacity to remain tender in a harsh moment, to remain honest when silence would be easier, to remain sovereign when shame tries to drag you back into submission. That is strength now, not the armor, not the deflection, but the radical willingness to stay awake in a world that profits off your sedation. And staying awake means you see clearly. You see how every external noise is designed to keep you from listening inward. You see how every false urgency was a smokescreen to distract you from your truth. You see how every role you played was just a placeholder for the self you hadn't yet claimed. You've reclaimed it now. And what you've reclaimed is unshakable. It isn't performance. It isn't perfection. It's presence, raw, embodied, unapologetic presence. The kind of presence that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that simply is. And in that being becomes a beacon, not for attention, but for liberation. Because nothing is more liberating than a soul that chose to return to itself again and again without needing the world's approval to know its worth. You don't chase the light anymore. You embody it. Not a light that blinds, but a light that reveals the cracks, the contours, the wild, unfiltered architecture of your becoming. You no longer seek escape. You seek embodiment. You walk slower now, not out of hesitation, but out of reverence, because every step is sacred when it's rooted in your truth. And your truth no longer needs decoration. It doesn't beg to be dressed up in false humility. It doesn't shrink to fit the comfort of others. It stands firm, not as a weapon, but as witness. Witness to the child you held when no one else did. Witness to the nights you screamed into a void that never echoed back. Witness to the strength it took to love yourself in a world that taught you to monetize your wounds or hide them. But you hid no longer. You stayed, you dug, you excavated the buried voice, and when it rose, it did not ask for validation. It asked only for space. And you gave it. That space became sanctuary, not just for you, but for everyone watching, silently wondering if it's possible to feel and still be whole. You became the answer to that wondering, not by avoiding your pain, but by inhabiting it fully and still choosing to speak, to move, to live as if the soul was never meant to be silenced. Now, even your silence speaks. It speaks of sovereignty, of depth, of a war fought and won without fanfare. It speaks not in volume, but in vibration, a frequency that no longer pleads to be felt because it is felt by anyone close enough to be honest. by anyone still enough to hear, you don't strive to be understood. You strive to understand, not to justify, but to witness the whole of your becoming. You ask better questions now, not how do I fix this, but what is this here to teach me? Not how do I get over it, but how do I walk with it in a way that honors the truth of what I've lived? That shift, it's everything. It's what turns healing into heritage. It's what transforms the wound into a well, a source not of endless suffering, but of endless awakening. Because once you stop fearing the pain, you stop fearing the power it tried to hide. And in its place, you find presence, presence that doesn't flinch, presence that doesn't perform, presence that holds the rage without rushing it away, holds the tenderness without questioning its strength, holds the you who trembles and the you who stands tall as one indivisible truth, fully lived, fully known, fully here. You no longer separate yourself into compartments. No version of you is disqualified. No moment of you is dismissed. The strong one, the scared one, the silent one, the seeker, the cynic, the believer, all are welcome. All are worthy, because your healing has made you a vessel, not a verdict, a sanctuary, not a solution. You are not an answer to be memorized. You are a living question to be met. And that meeting, that daily choice to return to yourself without condition, that is the deepest form of discipline. That is the radical act in a world built on self-abandonment. To return to yourself again and again without flinching, without fleeing, without needing to be better first. This is the revolution. You no longer crave to be saved, you crave to be seen. And because you've seen yourself, you can now see others, not as reflections, not as threats, but as fellow travelers, learning to carry their pain with gentleness and fire. You walk differently now because you know every step, no matter how hesitant, is sacred when taken in truth. And your truth, no longer buried, no longer edited, no longer postponed, has finally taken its place, not at the edge of your life, but at the center. You live from the center now, not the outer orbit of reaction, not the crumbling edges of performance, but from the rooted, quiet stillness that no applause can reach and no criticism can shake. That center is not empty. It is anchored in values you no longer negociate, in boundaries that no longer apologize, in love that no longer demands you shrink. You do not chase intensity anymore. You choose intimacy, not just with others, but with the sacred terrain of your own soul. You find yourself in the in-between moments, in the pauses, in the half-breath before a response, in the gentle courage it takes to stay true to yourself when no one's watching. And slowly, the life you used to fantasize about becomes a life you inhabit. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are present, fully, finally, freely, no longer haunted by what happened, no longer hostage to who you had to be, no longer negotiating your right to feel. You are not what hurt you. You are not what broke you. You are what remains after the fire, what remains after the flood, what remains after you stopped trying to survive and started learning how to live. And now you no longer live like life owes you anything. You live like you owe yourself everything, not in guilt, not in urgency, but in quiet, undeniable reverence for every breath you've earned. Every version of you that kept going when it would have been easier to give up. Every whisper of strength that echoed inside you before you knew it was strength. You honor yourself by showing up, not because you're fearless, but because fear no longer commands your loyalty. You no longer ask the world for permission to be whole. You show the world what wholeness looks like when it's built from broken pieces, gathered in the dark and named divine in the light. And there's no turning back. You've tasted your truth. Now, and even when it's bitter, it's better than any sweetness forged in silence. You walk forward, not to prove you're healed, but to practice being human, with your eyes open, your scars softened, and your soul fully awake. And that's the work, not a finish line, not a trophy, just this moment and the next and the next, lived not in fear of pain, but in partnership with presence. This is what healing becomes. A return, a remembering, a reclaiming, and in that reclamation, you become the most powerful thing a human being can ever be. Yourself. Yourself unmasked, unmuted, undeniable. You no longer echo the voices that tried to name you. You speak in your own rhythm now. Your truth does not tremble. It resonates because you've stopped trying to become someone, and you've started being the one you always were before the world taught you to doubt it. There's no costume left, no role to audition for, no throne to beg for approval from. You are not here to perform. You are here to embody, to walk as living permission for others to drop the act, to exhale, to feel again. You are no longer afraid of taking up space because you finally understand you were born to disrupt patterns with your presence, born to honor pain with your patience, born to show that healing is not a fantasy, but a function of daily devotion. So you live with a different kind of intensity now, not the desperation of someone trying to be seen, but the gravity of someone who sees themselves, sees the world, sees what matters, and lives it without permission, without delay, without ever needing to shrink again. Because now your healing is not a destination, it's your way of being. Not a banner you wave, not a story you sell, but a quiet, relentless choice to honor the miracle of becoming. You've walked through fire and carried your ashes like scripture. You've sat with shadows and listened until they softened. You've made a home inside your own skin, not because it was easy, but because it was true. You've stopped reaching outward for rescue and started reaching inward for restoration. And what you found there was not a broken soul needing repair, but an ancient light waiting to be remembered. Now you move through the world differently, rooted, clear, unshakable in essence, even if still uncertain in step, because uncertainty no longer threatens you. You've befriended it. You've learned to dance with the unknown, as if it were your reflection. You've stopped needing to be invulnerable, because your vulnerability is now your strength. You stopped fearing the wound, because it's become the womb of your wisdom. And when they ask how you did it, how you turned your pain into power, your silence will say what words never could. I stayed, I listened, I loved myself when it made no sense to. I came home, and I never left again. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a life led not by fear, but by the fearless act of facing it all and choosing love anyway.